Hey everyone, Dan here from Creepy Creations again, and just a little more information on the motion sensors that we've been testing out here. Here's one of them. Now, by looking at it, you can probably tell we've got a bit of a restriction that we have to work around. The fact is the lens is very, very wide angle. In fact, you can see it covers almost, but not quite, 180 degrees in all directions. Obviously, for something where we're trying to trigger a scare in a narrow area, we need to narrow the field of vision down a bit for it. And we come up with a pretty clever solution. We just went down to the local hardware store and picked up one of these little PVC pipe connectors. Now this is for a half-inch pipe, but half-inch is the outer diameter, and so the inside diameter of the connector happens to actually fit perfectly over the end of the sensor. So now what we can do is glue that in place, and now we have a very narrow field of vision for the sensor so that we can more closely and precisely trigger our scares. The biggest problem with these, of course, is they're bright white, which in a dark area is going to make them a little too visible. So our simple solution, wrap them in electrical tape. That'll darken them up nicely, and they'll be way more hidden inside our haunted house. So here's one of the white ones. And here's one blackened up with electrical tape when we're done, so that'll make it pretty much invisible. The taping process is pretty simple. Justin's actually got 3 pieces of tape all prepped and ready to go. So to make sure you cover everything, we do the ends first. Then once the ends are done, the last piece basically just fills up the middle. And there you have it. Okay, so here's the problem we're trying to solve. We've got the circuit hooked up to our jack in the box, with our giant rat that jumps up at people, and we've got it hooked up to the motion sensor. But you can see that I don't have to get very close to the motion sensor. In fact, I can get quite a wide angle and it still gets triggered. Which unfortunately means anybody walking within about 10 or 15 feet of the scare are going to trigger it, and that's too wide a window to see through. So what we're going to do is we're going to put one of these little tubes that we've colored up in front of the sensor, and of course we'll trigger it as we're putting it on. We'll wait for the timer circuit to cycle through now. And now that I've got the tube in place, motion off to the side isn't going to trigger it, but when I get almost directly in front, that's when it's going to trigger the scare. And that's what we want, is that narrow field of view for it, to generate a very narrow passage that you have to cross through in order to trigger the scare. So the last step, of course, is to attach the tube to the sensor. We want to be careful that we don't damage it too much, so what we're going to do is put the tubing over the end, and you'll notice one end's got that sort of roughened looking end. That's actually a bunch of writing from the manufacturer, but it comes in handy because it gives us a nice rough surface for some glue to adhere to. So what we're going to do is hold that in place like that, and then just use a glue gun . And there's just one edge of it that will do, because the base of the detector is square. Okay, so we've basically gone around the whole thing, and we're just going to let that glue set for a bit, and then we'll see how it turns out. And there you have it. We've got our tube attached to the front of our sensor, and it's all set to trigger our scares with a narrow field of view, and help frighten some folks on Halloween. Okay, so we've got our test setup here. We've got the sensor, and then on the back of the garage door over there, that's about 5.5 feet away. We've got the center point, and we've measured out, it's about, what works up to about 1.5 foot on either side of the center point is where it actually gets triggered with somebody slowly walking by. So here we'll do a test. We've got hooked up to Jack and his little siren, and then Justin will walk through, and you'll see how narrow the you'll see how narrow that the window is. So even at about a little over 5 feet, we have a very, very narrow window. And of course, the closer to it the people are, of course, the closer the sensor they actually have to be before it goes off. So we've got ourselves a very nice narrow range of vision there for the sensor now, so that we can very tightly control when it gets triggered with somebody walking past. And there you have it, a way of narrowing the window of vision for your sensors, and it works awesome. So I hope that's helpful to you, and happy haunting!